2 couple bad, that's a hot take. Ain't nothing really sweet around my way. Had to put it on my lap with the hot say love for the trap taboo, just like shut it.
Hey, what's up guys? Back again with another video in the Spigot series. This time I'm going to show you how to use persistent data containers with blocks. So in my previous videos recently, I showed you how to use persistent data containers with items and with players so that you can store Java primitives within those two things. And yeah, it's an easy way for you to persistently store data without having to use files or anything like that. Files might be used behind the scenes with the API that you're using, but you don't have to worry about that. It's abstracted, so you don't have to worry about it. And so yeah, so I showed you how to do those, but I haven't shown you how to do blocks yet. And a lot of you have been asking me how to do blocks because blocks are actually a little bit more tricky than doing it with items and players. So I thought might as well just show you. Okay, so let's get started here. I'm just gonna make a simple new plugin, so new project. Okie dokie, so it looks like our new project has been loaded here, so let me open this up. And the first thing I want to do is what we did last episode. I showed you how to output a plugin directly to your plugins folder. So let's get that over with. Let's go to our plugin, our pom.xml, and then let me copy this, the plugin, and then paste it right here. And if you don't know how to do this, then just watch my last episode where I showed you how to do this. You just got to copy this and then set the output directory, and then it'll do the magic for you. So click reload there, and there we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is pull up the Java docs for Spigot so we can actually understand what's happening here. So let's search Spigot Java docs. And so you have to ask yourself, what kind of blocks can you use a persistent data container with? Because it turns out that you cannot use a persistent data container with all blocks. It's only certain blocks. And that is special blocks that have a certain type of block state. So if we search block state, it's an interface. So open that up. Oops. And here we go. So we got the interface block state. But basically this is just an interface that allows you to manage the state of your block, or get information on the state of your block, or set information on the state of your block, and all that fun stuff. And there's different sub-interfaces of this interface, including one for all of these different blocks here, but also including one called tile state. So if we click on tile state, this is actually a special state that allows you to use a persistent data container because it extends persistent data holder. So if you read this here, it says represents a block state that also hosts a tile entity at the given location. This interface alone is merely a marker that does not provide any data. Data about the tile entities is provided by the respective interface for each tile entity type. After modifying the data provided by the tile state, block state.update needs to be called to store the data. So yeah, and as you can see here, if we look at the methods, it has a method that returns a persistent data container for the block if it has a tile state, right? So again, this is only working for blocks that have a tile state. Every block has a block state, but not every block state is a tile state, okay? So it's a little bit of some Java inheritance and all that fun stuff, but basically you just need to understand that it's only for special blocks that have like entities within them or whatever. So tile entity blocks, in this case chests, hoppers, basically any block that is going to hold an item within it, or like has advanced mechanics like a conduit, stuff like that. Okay, you get the point, I think, right? But so to test this feature out, I'm going to be using a blast furnace, or actually a furnace. Either one should work. But what we're going to do is listen for a furnace smelt event, or whatever event corresponds to whenever you smelt something inside of a furnace. And then whenever something is smelted, we're going to access the furnace block that smelted the item, and then store the amount of items that have been smelted inside of that block. So basically, we're accessing the persistent data container of that furnace block, and then setting the amount of items that it has smelted. And then whenever we want to get those amounts of items that a furnace has smelted, we can have a command that does like /smelt count. And whenever you look at a furnace, it's going to read the furnace and check to see how many items it has smelted by looking at its persistent data container. So that's the example we're going to use here, okay? So yeah, we can close this now. But basically, it's just important for you to know that a block needs to have a block state of a tile state for it to have a persistent data container, okay? So let's get started here. We're going to have two packages, listeners and commands, just to have some order here. And what I'm going to do is first, let's make our furnace listener here. So we'll call this a cook listener. How about that? Cook listener. And inside the cook listener, we're going to do implements listener, like always, right? So that we can listen for events. And so event handler. In this case, what we want to listen for is whenever a furnace smelts an item, okay? So we'll do public void cook item, or how about smelt item? So smelt item, and then we'll look for the event. So let's try and figure out what the event is called. So furnace burn event. Oh, there we go. Furnace smelt event. So whenever, if we do control Q, it says called when a item stack is successfully smelted in a furnace. So that's exactly what we want. So furnace smelt event E, and then now whenever an item is smelted, it should call this event here, okay? Or this listener, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, so let's just test it out first. So we'll do something like sout e dot get block dot get type dot toString, and we'll just say something like block involved, just so that we can know it's working, right? We'll just output something, and let's go to our main class here and make sure that we register this. So persistent, or no, get server dot get plugin manager dot register events new cook listener, and this. Okie dokie. So now before we run this here, let's make sure that I get rid of this here. You're not going to have that, but I have it there, so let's get rid of that. And now we can run this, and it should automatically build our jar and then put it into our plugins folder if we pay attention here. Boom, there we go. So now we can start up our test server and see what happens. Alright, so now we're on the server here. Let's go ahead into /pl to see if the plugin's loaded, and there we go. So it says persistent blocks, which is our plugin name. And let's try out the plugin. So let's get a furnace here. So furnace, boom, and let's put some stuff inside. Let's get some pork. So pork, there we go. And let's get some coal. There we go. Okay, so let's put that in there. So there we go. And put the coal. And now when it smelts, we should get something into the console. Let's watch it. And boom, there we go. It says block involved. I spelled involved wrong, and then it says furnace. Good. All right, so now that we know the event works, let's go ahead and actually make it do stuff. So like I said before, whenever the furnace smelts something, we want to access the persistent data container of that furnace and then store like how many items has been smelted, okay? So let's try that out. So first, let's get the block that we want to access, which is the furnace. So block is equal to get block. And in case you're wondering what it does, it says the block which block is involved in this event. Interesting. So that'll be the furnace like we saw. So import that. And so like I said, we want to access the state of the block. So block state is equal to block.getState, and that will return the state of the block. But to ensure that we're working with a block that has a persistent data container, we want to make sure that it's a tiled state block. So we'll do if block state instance of tile state. So since tile state extends block state as an interface, if you do instance of and block state is a tile state, then this will be valid. So as long as block state is a tile state, then this will be valid, okay? And since we have a furnace here, it should be valid. We can assume that it is valid. So once we have that, what we can do is do tile state is equal to block state. So we're just converting our block state here to a tile state since we know it is a block state now. Alright, so since we have a tile state here, we know that the interface has a method here that allows us to access the persistent data container of the block. We saw that in the documentation. So if we do tile state.get persistent data container, it'll return that persistent data container for us, okay? So let's try that out. We'll do persistent data container is equal to tile state.get persistent data container, and now we can work with it. So first things first, we want to make sure that if it does not have the value that we're trying to access, we want to create it. So let's think about what we want to call it. So what do we want to store inside this container? We want to store, how about we store an integer that is the count of how many items have been smelted. So we'll call it smelt count. So if we want to check to see if it exists already, we can do if container.has, and has is how you check to see if it exists or not. And if you have not watched my persistent data container previous videos, then it might be helpful to watch those so you understand what's happening here, okay? So we want to do a new namespace key. Okay, and as you can see, that namespace key wants an instance of the plugin, so we need to make our plugin instance accessible. So we're just going to make a private static persistent blocks plugin variable here, and whenever the plugin loads up, we'll do plugin is equal to this, and then we can have an accessor method for that. So code generate getter, boom. So now we can access the instance of the plugin within our other classes here. Okay, so we'll do persistent blocks dot get plugin. Okay, and then we want to give that a string key. So what do we want to call the value that we're storing, the key of the value that we're storing? We'll call it smelt count, like I said a second ago. So smelt count. And then after that, we want to provide the persistent data type. So persistent data type dot integer, since we're storing just a number of how many items have been smelted. Okay, so that's the has method. It'll just check to see if that exists already. If it does exist, then we can access it. So we can do integer current amount is equal to container dot get, and then just provide what we want to get, which is the same thing that we have here. So let's just copy that. Boom. So that should get the value stored at that location if it exists, and we just check to see if it does exist. So it's going to return an integer, and it's going to store it into this variable here. And so since we have that, now we can update it. So we can do container.set, and then paste the same thing yet again, but instead this time, since we're using the set method, we want a third parameter, which is the value that we would have set it to. So since a furnace smelts an item one by one, all we need to do is just increment this value by 1. So that's simple enough, right? So we'll do current amount plus 1. So that's what's going to be the new value of the value of smelt counts inside the persistent data container of the block. So now the value of smelt count will be the current amount plus 1. So you're just literally incrementing it by 1. So it's going to be 1 higher than before. And yeah, so that should set it. And so we need to have the else statement here. So otherwise, if that value does not exist currently, then we need to have it exist. So that's simple enough. All we got to do is copy this here, copy, and paste it. Boom. And now instead of current amount plus 1, we'll just set it to 1. So since it doesn't exist already, then it's going to be the first time we're smelting an item, right? With the plugin involved. So we'll just set the value to 1 since it's the first item it's smelted. Okay. And yeah, so currently with what we know so far with blocks and items, that's pretty much all you have to do, except with items, I think you have to update the item meta. But in this case, since we're using block states and tile states and all that fun stuff, we need to update the state of the block. And we can do that with a special little method that is provided. We can do tile states.update, and this will just update the state of the block. Alright, so now let's make a command here so that we can actually test this new feature out. So commands, new Java class, and we'll call it a smelt counts command. And what this command is going to do for us is just going to be a command where if we look at a furnace or a furnace, then we want to access the persistent data container of that furnace and check to see how many items the furnace has smelted. So simple enough, right? So extends command executor, and make sure you implement the method here. So return true. And so if sender instance of player P is equal to player sender, so caching sender, you know that. And let's make that there. And then so after we get the player, let's get the block that was involved. So oh yeah, so we want to get the block that they're looking at, right? So how do we do that? We can do that by, well, first let's store it in a block variable. So block B is equal to block, or just block B is equal to, and then we can do p.getTargetBlock exact. So this is an easy way to access what the player is looking at. So in this case, it just wants 1 parameter or 3 parameters. We'll just provide 1 parameter, which is the max distance, and we'll just set it to something like 5. So that should be like 5 blocks away, like how long it looks for a block when they're looking at stuff, I guess, if that makes sense. And so now that we have the block that they are looking at, let's go ahead and make sure that it's a tile state block. So to do that, we can do if block.getState, b.getState is instance of tile state. So again, every block has a block state, but not every block state is a tile state. Does that make sense? Yeah, not every block state is a tile state, okay? So if that is instance of tile state, then we know it's going to have a persistent data container and we can access it. Otherwise, we can just tell the user something like p.send message. This is, we'll just give it to them straight. We'll say not instance of tile state. Okay. All right, cool. And so if it is a tile state, we can, make a tile state variable so we can access it easier. So tile state is equal to block.getState. Oops, I did it again. I mean b.getState, and we'll just cast it. There we go. And so now that we have that, we can do what we did a second ago. So we just copy the code really right there. Boom, boom. Let me zoom out a little bit. So in this case, oh yeah, we also need our container, don't we? So persistent data container is equal to tile state.get persistent data container. And so now if the block that we're looking at has a persistent data container and it also has a value of smelt count, then what we want to do is access that amount. And then after we get that amount, we want to tell the user what that amount is. So we can do p.send message, and we could say this block has smelted plus current amount items. So if it has smelted 5 items, it will say this block has smelted 5 items, okay? Otherwise, if it does not have a value of smelt count within its persistent data container, we can assume that it has not smelted any items. So we could say p.send message, this block has not smelted any items. Pretty simple, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all we need for that. Am I right? Looks pretty good, right? So again, just to recap what we're doing here, we're getting the player when they run the command, and then we're getting the block that the player is looking at with a range of 5 blocks. And then we're getting the state of the block that they're looking at and checking to see if it's a tile state so that we can know if it has a persistent data container or not. And if it is a tile state, then we'll just get that container and then access it, and then we'll tell the user what the current amount of the smelt count variable is holding, and then we'll output that to them. Otherwise, we'll say that this block has not smelted any items because we have not found that value within the persistent data container of the block, okay? And realistically, in a real plugin, you might want to check to see if it's a furnace first before you do any of this, because there's different types of blocks that have tile states, obviously, like chests and other hoppers and stuff like that, right? So looks like we're done with this. So let's go ahead and make sure that we register everything. So we'll do git command smelt count. Wait, how do I do this again? Smelt count.set executor, new smelt counts command. And boom, and it looks like that's all done. So let's go to our plugin.yml and we'll do commands smelt count description, get the number of items smelted from a furnace. All right, cool. So that should be all good to go. So let's run this now. It should automatically build it and put it into our plugins folder for us. Perfect. Now it's done. So let's make sure that we reload the server. So reload confirm, and there we go. Cool. So now let's try smelting some items again. So first let's run the command. So we'll do smelt count, and it says this block has not smelted any items, which is true because it was not using that new feature yet. So let's get some raw pork. Yeah, let's throw some pork in there. So let it smelt. Okay, so there's 1 item, so we'll do smelt count, and now it says this block has smelted 1 items. Awesome. So we can keep going here. What the hell? Yes, did you see that? It like glitched right there. It didn't put the item in there. What the hell? That's so weird. But I think y'all get the point. Does it work? There we go. So the block has smelted 3 items. So awesome. So that is how you access a block's persistent data container. Again, all you got to do is make sure that it has a tile state. And if it has a tile state, then you're going to access that tile state. And then you can access the persistent data container from that point on. And just make sure that you also update the tile state after you update the persistent data container of the block, because you can't forget that. If you don't do that, it'll ignore the changes that you've made. And yeah. Anyway, so thanks for watching, everybody. If you have any ideas for any new videos or tutorials that you want to see, then please let me know. Currently, I'm thinking about releasing a Christmas plugin, so let me know if y'all want to see that. It's going to be a cool plugin where you can make presents for people and then give them presents and they can open it and stuff like that. So if you want to see that, then just let me know and I'll release a video on that. Besides that, there's a link in the description below for the code for this episode in case you want to have a reference for it. So I'll leave that for you and you can bookmark it for future use in case you need it. And also I'll leave a link for our Discord server so you can join our community. It's a community of programmers who are passionate about programming, so you can get some new friends there who like programming. You can get help on your programming projects if you need anything that you need help on, like something that you're stuck on, for example. You can ask for help there and someone might be able to help you. And besides that, it's just a cool place to hang out, so make sure you join that. There's a link in the description below. And finally, if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, $5 or $10. So yeah, that's how you can support this channel. It comes with cool perks. It comes with early access to all of my new videos, just like this one here. This was early access for my members, so if you want to get all of my new videos ahead of time, then you can become a member, as well as you get a cool rank on the Discord server, so you can show everyone how swaggy you are. And finally, you can get yourself on the screen like you see right now. So thanks to all of my current members. Thanks so much, guys. It really helps that you support me like that. And thanks to everyone who's not a member currently too. I just thank you for watching my videos and subscribing and liking and all that cool stuff. So thank you to all of you. And yeah, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. If you like my video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.